Hello and welcome back to my series on this collapsible shelving unit, which can look like this when it's set up and it collapses down into that. This shelf can be interchanged into whatever kind of display you need, so this is just one of many options. I wanted to make a video that just answers a bunch of questions that I know you're gonna have if you're thinking about building this. The first thing that I want to address is this build for beginners at markets? And my answer to that is a hard no. If you are just dipping your toe into the water at markets, I would not recommend building this shelf. It's because I love you and this is a big commitment money-wise and time-wise. And if you're just dipping your toe into the water to see if you like markets, I really don't think it's worth putting in the effort to build this if you're not sure if you're going to continue down that road. I just want to be honest with that up front. However, if you have been doing markets for a while, you're a seasoned pro and you just want to level up your display a little bit, maybe you're looking at switching to vertical options, this build is perfect for you. It's the end-all be-all vertical display for markets, and I just want to use this concept for my entire booth, and I think we will end up there at some point. I have a little brain dump notepad here filled with all my notes answering all your burning questions about this shelf, and I'm gonna go in order of what you're probably most interested in to what you're probably least interested in. So starting up, let's rip the band-aid off for the cost. I have two receipts here. The first one is from my initial trip to Lowe's that I make in the build tutorial. This receipt was $337.33. Ouch. The second receipt is I ended up having to go to McCoy's for polyurethane, stain, and some paintbrushes, and this was $40.34, bringing my grand total for the second build of this shelf to $377.67. I do want to say you could probably get this lower if you are smart about it and maybe a little bit scrappy about it. For one, I bought a lot of things that if you build a lot of stuff, you probably already have them on hand. For instance, the paintbrushes, the polyurethane, the stain. In terms of the wood, you can buy longer pieces and get those cut down, and generally speaking, the longer pieces are cheaper per foot, but you do have to have access to a miter saw or a table saw, or be willing to ask the hardware store employees to cut it for you. I did buy the premium pine, which I know has a higher cost per piece, but that is what my dad recommended to me a couple of years ago when I built the original set of shelves. And for one, I wanted to keep my displays looking consistent, but for two, I know that my display looks as good now as it did 2 years ago, so why would I change anything about the materials? But the premium pine is a little bit more expensive because it's premium. So if you go with a different material, you might be able to get that material cost down as well. Additionally, this is interchangeable, so depending on your final plans for it, you may not need as many dowels, you may not need that metal rod that goes across the top for hanging apparel, but yeah, you should be ready to spend about $300 on it at least. The other thing you are probably interested in terms of commitment is the amount of time it takes. And if you watched my pegboard easel tutorial, we did that in a day. Super quick and easy. This one is not so quick and easy. But think about it like this. You put in roughly 8 hours of work and then you will be set for life on this market display. So in my build tutorial, it is split up into 3 parts. There's the beginning where we assemble the nesting shelves, the middle part where we assemble the frame, and the last part which we sand, stain, and seal the pieces. That first part where we assembled the nesting shelves took about an hour. That was with my dad's help. That step is very quick if you have an extra set of helping hands. The second step, when we build the frame, that took me about 3 hours. I will say I was recording during all of this, and those of you who make content probably know when you have to record, that slows you down. So I think if you are really quick and follow along with the instructions, you could potentially do that in about 2 hours, but I would set aside 3 hours for it to be on the safe side. And then lastly, the last step of sanding, staining, and sealing, it's totally optional and it's gonna take the longest. It took me about 4 hours in total. That was with all 3 steps of sanding, staining, sealing. Totally optional. I wouldn't recommend skipping it because it does protect your unit for years to come, and it gives you this nice finish look. And of course you can get it to whatever color you want if you stain or paint it. So that step is going to take the longest. So for sure you're looking at 4 hours. If you want to do that final finishing step, definitely looking at 8 hours or more. If you have evenings to set aside 1 week, you can get it done by working on it a little bit every evening. Or if you have a full day to devote to it, you could do it in a full day. But I would recommend splitting it up just to keep your sanity, because it is a lot to take on in 1 day. The other thing that you might be wondering is if you can do this without power tools. Technically, the only power tool you need is a drill. But if you have access to a miter saw and a nail gun or a staple gun, that's gonna make your life a whole lot easier for this build, but those are not required by any means. So the miter saw, if you don't have one, you have a couple of options. You can either get the people at the hardware store to cut your pieces down for you, whether you are cutting your dowels down or the shelf pieces down. There are 2 routes to take, and you're gonna have to read the instructions to get more info on that, because it's confusing. But you can either get the hardware store to cut your materials down. You have to be willing to ask them, and most stores limit the amount that they will cut for you. They'll likely only make 1 cut per piece for you. And if you don't want to do that, you can do the cutting with a jigsaw, which yes is still a power tool, but is a lot more of a cost-friendly power tool. However, if you use that route, you need to be very careful to cut straight lines, because if you are being zigzag with it, then you're not going to have a good result overall. Your last option for that step is they do have those handheld saws. Again, just make sure you're cutting straight lines. A 4th option is just, if you know a friend who has those types of tools, just ask them. Or I'm pretty sure you can hire like TaskRabbit, gig economy people for stuff like that as well. So there are options. You gotta get scrappy with it maybe, but you can do it without the miter saw. And the other one, I would recommend a nail gun or staple gun if you have one, but if you don't need to go out and buy one. You just need to use finishing nails instead, and you're gonna need a helping hand and then a hammer. Good old-fashioned hammer and nail will get the job done just fine. That first nesting shelf part though will take a little bit longer if you don't have that nail gun, but again, totally possible without it. The 3rd power tool that would be helpful but 100% not necessary is an electric sander for that final finishing step, just to get that step going quicker and over with faster. But you can always hand sand. I hate hand sanding things, and I would honestly just buy an electric sander. I think they're like 50 bucks, and I use an electric sander for everything. So for me, it would be a good investment. So if you think you might be building more things, it might be worth it just buying a sander. After you finish building, you might be curious about what the sizing is going to be like. So I actually have my tape measure right here. So we're going to measure everything together. So when it's disassembled and in the car, it's going to take up 2 feet of width. It will take up 74 inches of length, so right over 6 feet. And then height-wise, it takes up right at 4 inches. So that's the footprint that you're looking at in the car. For these shelves, when we travel, we actually store them inside of my collapsible pegboard easel, which I have a video on. And these help support the pegboards during travel. So that's one travel storage option. In terms of the setup shelf itself, the height is 6 feet. And then these shelves, this one is 7 inches deep, and then it goes 9 inches, 11, and then 13 inches deep. The floor footprint that it's gonna take up in your booth itself is 16 inches. And then this is gonna be 50 inches wide. And the shelves themselves are 44 inches wide. The distance between each shelf is 8 inches. You can always pick and choose which shelves you want to put out. So if you want this space here, then that makes about 18 inches, because remember the shelf is taking up some of the space. Up here, we have 26 inches. If you're gonna do hanging apparel, you'll have to at least take this shelf off, potentially this one as well. In total, you could get up to 55 inches of hanging space if you didn't use any shelves at all. Actually more, because you'll have this space under here. Speaking of which, this is a little bit of extra space. This is 14 inches of height. This is really good for small storage containers. That's what we do for our market setup. So I hope that is all of the measurements that you're curious about. I'm trying to think if I missed any, but I think that's it. Oh, the setup time. I did it on camera earlier. I was able to set up in 5.5 minutes, and tear down goes a little quicker. That took me 4 minutes. I will say I've been doing this for 2 years, so if you're just getting started, it's probably gonna take closer to 10 minutes for the setup and tear down, but as you get better, you'll be really quick about it. It'll be super easy. So yeah, looking at about 5 minutes if you're good and a seasoned pro, but if you're just getting started, plan for about 10 minutes, which I think is still pretty great considering how good this looks. And then, like I said, I'll do a better video about it a little bit down the line about all the types of setups you can do for this. But everything about this shelf is interchangeable. So you can choose to only do 2 shelves down here and do hanging stuff up here, or you could make the whole thing hanging if you'd like. You could do like a pegboard display up here. You could get creative with it. You could just do dowels and no shelves, which I think would be a fun option for just displaying tote bags on both sides. But yeah, it's totally up to you. There will be another video coming out with full layouts that I am experimenting with, but we won't have that ready when this video gets posted, but I will keep you guys posted. Other than that, I hope this video answered all your burning questions about this display. If you are interested in building one of these, I have the build tutorial on my page, and the building plans are for sale on my website at canyoubelieveit.com/shelf. The video will take you through the process, but the building plans are what has measurements. So that's how you can support me. And of course, you can always like this video, subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate that. And if you have any other questions, leave them in the comments, and I'll be sure to make a second part to this video if needed. Okay, bye.